My name is Ariana Figueroa, and I'm the health coach for Integrative Family Medicine of Asheville. And today we are doing an interview that is part of our series on parenting during the pandemic, how to build understanding and tools for dealing with the challenges our children and those of us who are parents are contending with right now. And I'm so lucky to be joined by Kriya Lendzion today. Kriya is a nationally certified counselor. She is a licensed clinical mental health counselor, licensed clinical addiction specialist, and certified prevention specialist. And just very briefly to give you context on Kriya's background, she received her master's degree in mental health counseling in 2003. And since that time, her career has really run the gamut. She's worked primarily in school settings, but with a wide range of kids, pregnant and parenting teen girls, juvenile justice, high-risk girls, expelled students, conducting substance abuse and wellness education for college students. She's currently the middle school counselor for Evergreen Charter School here in Asheville, North Carolina. Also conducts private therapy with adolescents and has provided drug and alcohol education to dozens of schools throughout North Carolina. So Kriya really brings a unique insight into what our kids and teens are currently experiencing from their perspective, as well as how we can communicate more effectively with them and see through the challenging behaviors to what's really going on. And I just want to say thank you so much for today.
I'm excited to be here. So I'm really excited to talk about this. And that's because I'm swimming in the sea of your middle and high schoolers, every day. And so I'm at Evergreen, but for those who are local, I probably worked with a lot of your kids because I do programming at a bunch of the charter schools and the private schools in town doing the drug and alcohol thing. But I get to drop into those communities and I stay in touch with those kids, which is a real honor that they stay in touch with me through high school and they reach out to me, and in between.
That's fabulous.
After they leave, they tend to stay in touch with me a lot, which is awesome. I'm honored by that. So I'm hearing not just from my Evergreen kids, but I'm hearing from kids across the the community about what this has been like for them. And one thing that I'm hearing a lot is that my parents don't know how hard this is for me. And there's a couple pieces to that. One is feeling like I don't want to burden my parents with it because they've got their own stuff going on. My dad lost his job. My mom lost her mom. They're really aware that we're stressed and we're overwhelmed and we're having loss and grief and we're a lot of things going on, and so they don't want to burden us with their stuff. They don't realize that's their job, and that I have to explain that like it's actually we feel like we're sad when you don't share your tough stuff with us, right? Like we feel like that's we're honored to have that role, but so they don't always know that.
It sounds like there's a disconnect between, preteens, teens, and parents, and that teens are witnessing the bereavement, the losses that are big, and they know that this impacts the whole family. And so there's a sense of not wanting to be fully open about how this is for them. And
and the other part is that, a lot of them don't even have the language to explain it themselves. They just feel off. They just feel anxious. They just feel depressed. They just feel lonely, but they don't even have kind of the EQ, the emotional, self-awareness or the language to be able to say that to their parents, sort of is not even knowing. Yeah. And then there's another sort of subset where I see that parents aren't really aware, that they are really wrapped up in ourselves. Let me make that, because let me say this. I am a parent, and I'm actually parenting 2 step teens that are here homeschooling every day and have been for a year, and my own who's 22, who kind of graduated from college during all of this and ended up coming home, which was not part of the developmental stage of post-college that we pictured. Right, and so he is back living with mom, living at home, going through his own stuff related to his own natural development being kind of stunted, which is part of what's going on. So so I do think that for a lot of kids, granted, there are some kids that have just like, this is the best thing ever for them. I do find that to be the minority of the kids that, that I run across, but there are some who were socially anxious, who had, some issues with social skills, or academic school just felt really uncomfortable for them in certain ways. And so being home in the safety and the coziness of a safe place, where home felt safe, they're like, this is awesome. Can I do this forever? So know that they're a subset, but they're a minority. And most of the other ones are experiencing so much stuff that I think we're often unaware of. So
the most teens right now, and when we think teens, or the age group that we're really talking about, is from ages 10 to 13, preteens, and then teens 13, 14 on up, and into young adults, right? And thinking about, from their perspective, it sounds like this is really hard, and part of that is, what do we say and how do we say it? For brains that are developing, and people who are still learning how to have a feeling and communicate about it well. There's always the language or the skills emotionally to do that. And you just briefly touched on something regarding your son that I think is really fascinating. Developmentally, what would be normal for right now?
Right.
Stymied, or there's a block there because of the pandemic.
Yeah. And that's a big, huge piece of this. So you think of that whole age group. And so for me, so I work with like 10-year-olds, 5th graders through, but then again, I'm like my son's friends who all just graduated with college are also like my other kids. You know what I mean? And so, we forget about the kids that we want to remember that the kids who graduated high school last year, who thought they were going out into the world or going out into college or going at, that everything got turned upside down for them too. Our older teens, that are kind of in that young adult category. But yeah, what you're just saying is that whether they are in 5th grade, or whether they are in 8th grade, or whether they are in 12th grade, is that there's been sort of the natural, the developmental stages that they're in, which are just ingrained in their DNA, is this drive to get more and more independence, more freedom, more independence from us, right? More space from us.
Independence and space.
And
parent.
Yeah. Right. So more independence, more freedom, more sort of more skills to do things on their own, sort of going out and sort of experiencing the world a little bit more on their own. I mean, that's increasingly, what is happening during adolescence, what's supposed to be happening during adolescence, right? And the way, and so that's been stunted, right? They're right under for a lot of us, right under our noses. Or, they're interestingly, like they're not, because it's supposed to be, what happened, in order for that to go the best, the healthiest, is that there's some scaffolding around that, right? So that, and we take the scaffolding down as they demonstrate that they have the skills to sort of manage their life a little bit more and a little bit more healthily and safely, right? And so we take that down and give them a little more room, to be independent and free, and to figure out who they are separate of us. Oh my gosh. But there's sort of like this weird thing happening where we're either up in their grill over their shoulder all the time, or we're working and they're home alone, for 3 to 5 days out of the week. So even those that are doing a hybrid thing, they're still home, most of the time. And so they're actually not getting like the scaffolding. We're either too close or too far and not guiding them.
What about that?
Yeah, I kind of just did too.
Of like day-to-day schedule and routine, how normally for a teenager or a preteen, you're with your parents and then you go to school where there's structure, there's friends, there's identity that's outside of your home. Mm-hmm. You go home and your parents are back from work, and that's gone.
Right. And it's like safely supervised. There's always sort of an adult somewhere nearby, even if it's like Wonder Woman plane, I think about the Wonder Woman plane with like the she's got the see-through plane that she flies over with and ready to scoop in. Like that's how my model of parenting, when you have an adolescent, is you want them to not know that you're right there, but you kind of are ready to swoop in, right? Is that's not, that's not what it's looking like. So
that's not possible.
So they're not getting like the guidance that's normal, to develop independently in a way that's normal. And then, the things that, like when they're in elementary school, so much of their identity is just interwoven with the family, right? And with us as parents, and they're totally fine with that. And then, something happens it's pivotal around 5th grade. That's why I love working with this age, when they start to kind of like, they're questioning us, they're thinking about who they are separate of us, they start to like get critical of us, which is a normal part of that, right? And to sort of call out all our hypocrisies and all the ways that they're nothing like us. And I know that's hard. That's a whole other conversation, but it's actually normal, and it's not bad, because we want to let them be their own person and let them know that it's okay with us to be their own person. But so this is supposed to be happening, right? Is that they are getting their identity from other places and other activities and other meaningful, they're finding out like what their jam is and what they're passionate about and what they're good at. And some of that happens in the home still, but a lot of that starts to happen outside. It's activities that are at school. It's the extracurriculars and the clubs and the things that they start to get into as they get older, at school and after school.
I love that.
And the sports and the performing arts and the debate club and all that stuff, right? They find new parts of themselves and express new parts of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that missing, that's been missing for a year. And I know that some people have figured out some ways to do it. They started some dance classes up. And so they're like socially distant, with a few kids in the class, but it's still not the same thing. They're not having their spring performance with all the parents sitting in the audience. Everything is still different and still, has a sense of loss with it, right? So all of those things that were meaningful to them and giving them a sense of who they were is gone, right? As well as a sense of identity. So there's this real and then the friendships, then the social world, which is enormous. So for an 8th grader, nothing matters more than their friends and feeling connected and belonging. Nothing. And that's actually brain-based, right? So there's and developmentally is that our kids are supposed to be kind of orienting. We still want them to be rooted in us, but they're really orienting increasingly in their tribe, right? They're supposed to be finding their tribe kind of for survival as they move beyond us, right? Their little pack in their village, whatever. And so when they feel rejected, right? When they feel like they don't excluded and disconnected from their tribe, it literally is just, there's a brain thing happening. It's like the amygdala, the hand model of the brain. Yep. But it's like their animal instinct part of their brain is telling them that they are in actually a state of survival threat. And they don't know to give the words to that. They just know, I feel really off and bad and anxious and funky, and sad. But it's actually their system is telling them like, you're in danger because you're isolated, because you're not connected to.
I just want to highlight that because I think that that's such an important core concept that really shifted my awareness of understanding, a developing brain. That for kids in that age group, where biologically there's an imperative to leave the family and to be starting to build identity and tribe and connection and belonging to the home, to not be able to do that puts them in stress mode, fight or flight. Like it puts them in the brain state. Yeah, more reactive and around like flooded emotionally. That concept. Yeah. This is the prefrontal cortex and that hand model, and this is the amygdala and the midbrain and the reptile brain. And then when you're stressed, you don't have prefrontal cortex for self-control or
lid flip
for higher thinking. This is where they are. Yeah, they flip their lid. Just that disconnection. Yeah.
And I've seen an interesting thing too, going on. It's been like a shifting of friendships. So again, the stability, if the stability is in your social acceptance, as we go into middle school and into high school, and there's been this difference between, so some kids have been able to hang out together, because they're in the neighborhood or because their friends didn't have their families didn't have the same restrictions, right, on sort of social distancing. And then there's some that have had, they've been able to connect because they've had social media, or they've had certain apps, or they have phones. And then others that don't have the phones and don't have, particularly around in the middle school age.
Not that either.
Right. Or haven't had the same access to stuff. And so it's really dependent. And then some, like I see a bunch of the boys more than the girls even, but that are gaming, they're connecting through their Xboxes, and so the kids that are in or out of that are in or out of the social connection. So there's been the beautiful thing has been that I have seen some of like the cliques and the things like dissolve, where people are just like so excited to connect with, the kids are so excited to connect with anybody that they're forming friendships that they had dismissed before. But then there's a lot of friendships that are really shifting around and really disorienting, the kids to feel that way. And
just in terms of accessibility to connecting to other people, accessibility to the technology that lets you to continue with friends in those age groups. I hadn't thought about that at all. And that's totally changing the social landscape. I love that you mentioned a positive way where the cliques are kind of broken open and friendships that might not have happened are now happening. And then the hard way where, what if you don't have a smartphone? What if you don't have access to some of the gaming platforms or your internet isn't fast enough?
Yeah. And I've had kids that are like, well, my grandparents live with me. And so I'm not even leaving the house to protect, Nana and Pop, versus, and then they're watching their friend. They do have the phone and they're watching their friends, get together and play on the weekends and have overnights because they're in a bubble, or they're not caring. And that's been really hard.
That there's this idea of complicated grief that comes from, this psychological interpretation of grief. And this just sounds a little bit like a complicated form of loss.
Yeah.
To process, especially developing brain, the grief and sadness and feeling left out of watching your friend group get together when you know that you're protecting your grandparents who you care about by not going with them, but then there's still all of those feelings. That's a lot.
Right. Yeah. And there's been layers and layers of loss, of loss and grief. And, and when we feel it, whether it's like, well, I'm used to going to hear live music or go to my favorite restaurants or go, all those little things that, that we miss. But there's even ways that we can adjust better to that. It doesn't impact our whole sense of selves and identity quite the same way, because we're a little, hopefully we're rooted in sort of more than, our social world and our activities at this point in our lives, but that I think, using the word trauma is not over exaggerating. I mean, this has been traumatic in that it's been like this relentless ongoing assault on all that they find, predictable and stabilizing.
Interesting.
Just sort of over and over. And so even though, yes, it's great, like the fact that restaurants have opened up to a certain extent and their schools have opened up to a certain extent, it's still weird. It's still awkward. It's still, they're sitting there in a classroom and at the lunch table and, 6 feet away and not able to connect with each other in ways that feel really satisfying.
Yeah. There's an, so that's really hard, even when it's more normal.
Right.
I think from one of our previous conversations, you mentioned that you did a poll with some of your preteens that you're working with. Tell me about what this is like from your perspective. Can you share just a little bit about that? Because I feel like I
will. Yeah. So, and some of this information, it was really informative to me because I got to hear, what I had asked. So this is the kids at my school, and I surveyed them, 5th grade through 8th grade, both in like the end of September when we were sort of just, kind of getting into all of this for this school year, anyway. And then again, just about a month ago, a little more than a month ago. And they just, what I heard is what actually, because they have had some statistics come out just recently on a national level, which showed that, ER admissions and suicidality in terms of not completed suicides, but suicide attempts, suicidal ideation, that is up 25 to 30%. They're showing in our kids and our adolescents. And it was already in some increasing crisis states over the last 10 years, right? So, so what I heard from the kids was, I'm depressed and I'm anxious, kind of describing what I know as a clinician is depression and anxiety, and probably, diagnosable levels of that at extraordinary rates. So there was about a third of the kids that identified themselves as struggling with depression or anxiety, and in a normal, if we had done the survey any other normal year, it probably would have been 1 out of 5, that might have answered to one of those. But so, I think because you add that, those traumatizing pieces, that sort of the relentless attack part with fear, because there's been fear instilled from all these directions. And even if they aren't afraid of getting sick themselves, or they're not even sure what they're afraid of. They're soaking it in from the whole society and their families, you know, who might be more afraid than they are, right? So, you know, just there has been, you know, so they're saying they're, you know, they're struggling with these feelings that, again, they can't even necessarily sort of define. But along with the loss of their outlets, the loss of their coping tools, the things that were normally their, you know, normally their thing, you know, so for a lot of them, they had activities outside, you know, or they're just getting together with their friends after school in the neighborhood, or, you know, was one of the things that they just, you know, they distressed from life with, and some of their normal, you know, their normal tools were gone. So, but what I heard, Ariana, is like over and over again was, number one was that, like, our parents have no idea how hard this is. Like, I did hear that, like, this is really hard for me too, you know, and my parents don't see that. And they dismiss it, and they mock it, and they invalidate it, you know, like, just like you, well, at least you don't ... or at least you have, you know, at least when I was your age, you know, we didn't even have the devices. We didn't have, you know, like, we do that.
You have it lucky. You can connect through Facebook Messenger right now. We didn't have
right.
Messenger when I was 8, 10.
Yeah.
And I wonder, going back to what you said at the very beginning of this conversation, the kids thinking, oh, well, my mom just lost a parent, or my dad just lost his job, internally thinking, what's going on with me isn't, like, I need to just not share it because that's bigger.
Yeah.
Parents conveying that message to kids.
Yeah. And I think
really,
because, I'm sorry.
No, to just really, like, what is a lacrosse team in comparison to losing a job? Like, get with it.
Exactly. Right. Is it parents are just like, well, what do you have to be so upset about? Like, you're hanging out, eating snacks on the couch with the cat, doing school from here. Like, you know, how bad is that really? Yeah. Like, texting with your friend all day. Like, it just doesn't look that rough to me. You know, here I am having to deal with this, and this, you know. So, but we'll get to that when we talk about what they're asking for from us, right?
Yeah.
So, but the other thing I heard over and over and over again is, like, I feel like I'm under so much pressure. Like, please lighten up the pressure. So they're feeling like, between school and parents, and a lot of time from parents, it's sort of trickling down from school, or how parents are translating and conveying school expectations to the kids is this, like, expecting the kids to be to do the normal things, to perform and be as successful by all the same standards, by the normal standards, in a very abnormal time, under very abnormal conditions, but expecting them to, you know, do it the same way. And the kids saying, like, but this feel like you can give me the same amount of work, but it feels so much harder when, one, I'm not in a classroom of kids doing the same thing. Like, we're not all swimming in the same direction. You know, I'm not in the sea, the waters of everybody doing the same thing, going, oh, cool, okay. Hey, what did you get? How did you get that answer? But of just the positive peer pressure, the flow of that. Yeah. Right. They're not able to just be like, hey, teacher, I don't get this. Hey, can, you know, and have the teacher just pat them on the shoulder to be like, you got this. I know, you know, during the test, just like, breathe, you're good. You know, like, as teachers, you're great at doing, right? That's social emotional support as they go. That's great, really. Yeah. And so instead, they've got this whole other, you know, the environment around them pulling on their attention span. We know, we can relate to this more than we're acknowledging, right? Is that delineating school from home, you know, is now, you know, there's no line, and that's really hard. But yeah, so it's that pressure piece of feeling like they're feeling like, you know, not only is school harder for a lot of the kids, but it's missing all the good parts. I mean, you ask kids why they go to school. Most of them, it's like, if they love a class, they love a class because it's engaging, often because it's hands-on, because there's some cool project, there's some cool field trip, right?
All their friends are in that class.
Their friends are there. The magic happens at, like, lunch or recess, or, you know, like, so you're not getting like, oh, my favorite part of school was sitting there and listening to my teacher. Like, I've never heard a kid say that in my 20 years of school counseling, right? And that's what they have now, is almost 99% of the parts of school that weren't enjoyable to start with.
Okay. So to recap what you just said, because that was a lot of
Yeah.
information to be thinking about. Kids right now are feeling like it is so much harder than their parents realize, and that
Yeah.
was not being heard. It's being made fun of or belittled or just brushed off in light of the other challenges that the family is facing, that the adults are also contending with. And that on that, there's so much pressure right now on kids and so much of a push to just keep performing like they always have been, to keep getting A's when nothing is like it was when they were maybe getting A's or B's or C's or whatever.
Yep.
Everything has changed. And in fact, the structures that were in place that helped them to perform well are gone. And what's left is staring at a Zoom screen for hours and hours and hours and listening to the teacher without the positive social reinforcement of other kids paying attention, without maybe the fun school activities they looked forward to, without the like pat on the back from the teacher saying, hey, you got this, you're good.
Right.
All of that is gone. And instead they're struggling in a new, unpredictable, unstructured, distractible platform.
Yeah. And there's this kind of catch-22 where there's a lot of kids that are like, so there's this whole debate about screen on and screen off, and and it's like they're being pushed to have their screens on. And I get as a teacher, because I also teach, it sucks and it's very unsatisfying to us as teachers. Like it's soul sucking. Let me be honest. It's kind of soul sucking. It's missing all the parts that we like about teaching, to sit there and talk to black screens with names on them. I mean, that's, and I know that when kids are engaging, when they do have the pictures on and they are sort of right up in, where their camera's on, and they're able to interact with each other and the teacher, that they are more engaged, and then they are feeling more satisfaction and fulfillment from school. But I totally understand why at 12 years old, I mean, again, they're getting a lot of pressure from their parents and from the teachers to be like to engage and have your screens on. When I was 13 years old, if I knew that I was going to be recorded for an hour, like my face with whatever might be going on with my complexion or my hair, and somebody could be staring at me for a straight hour that I didn't even know it. No, I would have been completely self-conscious. So I had a girl, there was this whole battle that the teachers were stressed out about this girl, not having her screen on, and she wasn't explaining it to anybody, and they were emailing the parents. And then when she talked to me, she's like, my internet gets glitchy and I freeze in weird ways. And so we had a recording of language arts the other day where I was going,
oh no,
through like the whole class.
No.
And it was recorded.
Oh no, and then the other students are probably going to say something about that. And then
they're making it turns into like a meme and a class joke. Like that's what kids do with that stuff. Just try it. So anyway,
what's fascinating about that is that there's a level of awkwardness here that literally did not occur to me at all as a parent, a human being, just because I've never been a student having to be in a Zoom class. Like,
we can't relate.
That's going to be terrible.
Right.
Yeah.
We can't relate. All we can do is go, okay, well, let me just get into my 12-year-old self and imagine my 12-year-old self in this 2021, 2020 scenario. Yeah. I mean, that's the best that we can do. Yeah. But the best we can do is take that and then ask our kids to explain to us what they're feeling and what they're thinking, what they're experiencing from their perspective.
With a beginner mind instead of an inner critic, with an understanding that maybe we really don't know what it's like. Right. And maybe if we can come in with some compassion and curiosity, maybe they'll share.
What I hear kids saying a lot is that they feel like they're falling short of all the things. I mean, that's part of like what's feeding anxiety and depression as well as all those other things we talked about, is that they just feel like they're constantly like, I'm just falling short. I just can't do anything good enough. As I used to. So even these kids that are used to being high achievers, they're used to being engaged in school and being known for that, are not there, and they're really down on themselves about that. So, but the final thing that I need to say, and we'll talk about this in a minute, is that a overwhelming amount of kids said, you are getting your stress on me.
Oh,
you're getting your stress on me.
So we're getting our stress on our kids. I want to be mindful about that and think about it. And think about the short-term and long-term consequences. So what we shouldn't be doing is, downplaying or writing off the experiences that are going through. What we shouldn't be doing is, you know, getting stressed out and getting our stress on them. And what we shouldn't be doing is thinking we know what it's like for them and that it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
Tell me more about what we can do to help right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, the flip side of that is really validation. is as simple as that is just being like, okay, you know, like, I see how hard this is. I know this is really overwhelming. I know this is hard. I understand. I imagine. I mean, just starting sentences with that as much as we can, and then leaving it there. That because we also have a really bad habit as parents of doing, I call it inserting our big old butts. as we say something validating, you know, or we apologize, or we say, and it's like, oh no, you needed to just clip it. You needed to stop it there, because then we go, but, you know, you did this wrong, but you need to do this better. But you know, it's like, no.
And this is hard, but you need to, you know.
Yeah, just do some just validating, and stop it there, you know, and to just say like, do you need to talk about it? Or but they just to be recognized for how they're feeling, and that it's valid, that they're seen for that. It's just way more powerful than we can ever imagine. Just to start there, right? To start with validating that. And then, you know, there's this, you know, we talked about like their need for independence and freedom, you know, how that's really that developmental stage is really being stunted right now, and how that's feeling stressful. And so, you know, it's funny because again, in my survey, I just got all this beautiful honesty from them. And some kids were like, well, there was a lot of kids that were like, oh my gosh, I can't get away from my parents. like, yes, it's been fun to do extra activities and all that, but they just don't know when. And then we as parents, because I'm talking to plenty of parents that are like, oh my gosh, I need space for my kids, right? I'm gonna commit Harry. And I think that there's this, like, we feel like we should be extra present, right? But so there's kids that are saying, just please step off my grill and give me some space. And then other ones that are like, yeah, but then they're also not here when I do need them, how I need them. So you know, they're lost in their computer. So, I mean, my piece of advice for that is that, again, came from the kids, is ask me. Like, ask me what I need, because I know, and I had one kid say, I know this is really crazy. Or I know, what did she say? I know it's hard. I know this is hard for you to deal with, but sometimes I want to be alone. And then sometimes I want more support. And sometimes I want one thing 1 hour and one thing another hour. And that must feel crazy as a parent. Like, she actually just named that. Wow. So I think, you know, just being like, hey, what could you know, what do you need from me right now? You know, what do you need from me today? And knowing that they do need some space, you know, how can you help them, whether it is just sort of like you ushering the younger children away to make sure that they're not bothering the older kid, and that she has space in her room without the door being knocked on, you know, or you help your kid create even more of a cool oasis in their roam. You know, I saw a lot of kids put in all these LED lights and really like amp their room space up.
Oh, cool.
And like kick their room space up a notch and make them their little Zen, you know, their Zen dens.
Okay.
Or do they need outside space? You know, do they need, can you drop them off like just at a park with a book, you know, around the corner somewhere, and trust that they're going to be okay? Or so that's just, I mean, that's a brainstorming thing, I think, to involve your kid in, but you need to ask them. Don't assume you know what they need, but ask them, because they are needing, you know, they are needing some room from us.
So go in with assumptions, go in with curiosity, validate.
Absolutely. Yep.
Validate, and then validate and stop. Don't validate and then add, but you need to fix you need to actually remember to take out the trash. Like, just say, I know this is hard. You know?
And there's time to do that. You can do that. You can still ask to take out the trash, but just give it a few, let the validation soak in. So they don't feel like we always, like, all of our compliments or all of our validation always comes with some secret agenda, you know, that's more selfish. We don't want to establish that, right? That is our norm either.
Or with a critique of some kind. We don't want that either.
Right.
And then get collaborative and brainstorm together and say, you know, what do you need right now to have space? You need your room into a Zen den. That was such a fun phrase. Or do you need more outside time? Like, how can we give you what you need, and start talking frankly about it?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And then, I think another huge one is, and I know that this is hard, but is like recalibrating our expectations. And I know there's a lot of stuff woven in to that. A lot of us discover that our own like upbringing, the expectations our parents had on us or what school meant to us, or we have all these things interwoven with what our expectations are about for our kids, right? That can be loaded. And so we're in, again, unprecedented time, right? Where it's completely abnormal. So throw all the normal expectations out, and then asking like, you really have to ask yourselves as a family, like what's most important to us? Really, like as parents, what's most important, but as a family, like what's most important? And I had a great conversation with a parent who is also a school counselor. So she's also holding all the kids' space, like I am, but she's also parenting, she's parenting a middle schooler. And she had made a great, like a boundary that not everybody thought was great. I just say like, because teachers are like, oh, we need this kid to do this and do that. So teachers, again, and because they have expectations on them, they haven't stopped. The state still is expecting certain standards to be covered. They're still expecting certain tests to be made. There's certain outcomes still expected, unfortunately. So that trickles down.
Funding.
Right. So that's trickling down.
Right.
So the teacher,
direct, and for the teachers, which then filters down.
Right. And then the teachers do care as well. And they're like, well, I don't think this kid feels as good because they're not as, they're not performing the same way. Right. Mm-hmm. But this parent, I loved it because she's like, here's what we've decided. We've decided that this year is going to be a good enough year. Meaning, because when we really checked in with ourselves and each other, right, we realized that what was most important was our mental and emotional and physical and relational health as a family. And that we were going to unapologetically, like what I watched her do, which I just had mad respect for, so now I'm coaching it to others, is hold this unapologetic boundary with the rest of the world, kind of as a family, of like, you know what, like we're okay with like our esteem, our identity, our sense of meaning, like all those things, like we're good with the C being good enough. Having the screen on half the time during class being good enough. With like.
I love that. In the past, E or an F might have represented not trying hard enough or not the right time management skills or prioritizing other things. Right now, saying the C is a good enough thing is because we're prioritizing mental health, emotional health, physical health, relational.
And because the important thing is, what does this kid need to feel good about himself and mentally and emotionally healthy? So if to him, he's like, you know what, no matter what, like, I really want to make a B happen. I've always held B's or I've always held A's, or I'm looking at this, high school or this college that I want to go to. And so this does really matter to me. And so I'm going to be anxious and upset if I can't make that happen. Mm-hmm. Then there's a different game plan, right? Then you're like, okay, how do we wrap around and help you get that? Help you get that grade and play the game and do what you need to. But otherwise, maybe you help your kid if they just need to be okay with themselves, and we help instill that is like, honey, it's all right. It's all right if this is because, so this mom said, because she held this line with the teachers. It all started with an email to the teachers where she said, so my kid is turning off, like, for one, we as a family he is healthier when he's not on his phone during the day. Like the phone for him is just a social thing. It's not a school thing. So for one, like we're asking you not, like, he's not going to do assignments that require him using his phone. Oh. Number two, he stopped at 5 o'clock. He's done. So if school ends at 2, and his homework goes back, he's not doing it, because that's when we do family time and we nurture our souls and our spirits and we get outside and we play games and we take care of ourselves and each other after 5 o'clock, and school is done. So sorry, it's not happening if it, it would take longer than that. He's like, and the end. Thank you for understanding. Right. And I just thought it was beautiful, because I've seen, I think the families that are doing that more, are thriving more as far as what I see as far as like units, kind of writing it out together and being mentally and emotionally healthy through it. And kids feeling supported is when their parent steps in like that to be like, I'm going to actually be like a kind of a fierce warrior for you and advocate for you and your mental and emotional health. Not only do I see, I'm listening to what you say you need, but I got your back.
Yeah. Yeah. And how does
I got your back.
Family dynamic, and how does that affect for that kid, for that teenage boy, a sense of groundedness and belonging and safety and okay, I can get my needs met.
Yeah.
What I heard you say is paradigm shift from how are we going to maintain success in the midst of challenge to wait a minute, how can we prioritize values over success? How can we prioritize mental health, family health, physical health? Understanding that this is not a normal time. And so how can we just as a family sit down together, have that conversation and define for each other, like as a parent, what do I need to be able to show up for you and not be in this place, not have my lid flipped all the time so that I can listen. And then for you, tell me more about what you need right now.
Right. Because it establishes this like culture of resilience as a family. When we can do that as parents and we can facilitate that as parents of like, yeah, this is some crazy crap. And it is unpredictable. I don't know what's going to happen next week. I don't know what's going to happen with our business. I don't know what's going to happen with grandma. I don't know. But what I do know is that we've got each other. We are hella strong. We have gotten through other stuff before. As parents, we have got you. Like I am going to, like I got you, and so we're going to be okay, because we can lean on each other and we have all these resilience tools. Like it's really just, we've got all this stuff that we can use to get through all of this, and
which for parents out there, if you hear resilience tools and you're like, yeah, that sounds nice. What is that? We actually have 2 other interviews that are going out with local psychologists, Dr. Brent Beam and Dr. Will Hamilton, that are specifically about what are some tools for resilience right now? How do we skillfully cope with uncertainty, with stress, with fear? And actually to circle back to what you just said, one thing that Dr. Hamilton said was often when we feel really bad, like our physiology is dysregulated, our lid is flipped, we focus on external, like how do I fix my parents so that I'm not feeling so awful? How do I'm feeling at school, I have to fix that. And we forget to focus on our bodies and starting there. Making sure, like, are we getting outside? Have we had fun or a good moment with someone we love? Have we had food, water? Have we stopped staring at a screen?
Right.
And
all that.
Just by focusing on that can help a lot. And it just sounds like that boundary you're talking about is putting down a line and saying, we're going to prioritize making sure that gets taken care of.
Yeah. And there's 2 thoughts I have branching off of that. One is that, so what that means, especially given that, like I said before, that their outlets, and their meaningful activities a lot of those have been stripped from them or are really altered, right? Is that they need our guidance, so pointing them towards the new alternatives. What are the new things? And even better if we can, not only do we just say like, hey, just go find something to do, go outside and find something, put down your phone, find something to do. Like even more helpful step is to give some ideas. Even more helpful step is to model it, and even more so engage in it with them. So this is where, our own self-care, super important, right? Because we're teaching them so much more than we realize when we're showing them how we are getting through the crap storm ourselves, and that it's working for us, right? That it's preventing us from getting our stress on them, as they've complained about, right? So they do need, our guidance in developing some of those resiliency skills, right? They might not know how to do it on their own. Gratitude practices are a beautiful thing that can be woven in, that have been shown to make changes in the brain. It actually helps our kids turn horrible experiences and uncomfortable and disappointments and mistakes into, learning opportunities and into, growth opportunities, right? So how can we have a gratitude practice as a family, whether it's sitting around at dinner or whether it's when we walk the dog or it's right before bed, or we have some kind of dry erase board on the fridge where everybody just writes something each day, particularly when things feel crappy and hard is when that's especially shown to wire some, like, I'm talking lifelong adaptive helpful stuff.
Wow, that's
So
I'm familiar with the science of, or the adult brain, that you have a tendency to focus on the negative, and by doing a gratitude practice in particular, this came from this concept of doing a gratitude practice at night before bed, where you not just write down a thing you're grateful for, but write the thing that was good that happened to you that day, and then what your role was in making it happen.
Oh, cool.
And do 3 of those every night. And then it kind of resonates in your subconscious overnight. It can kind of boost sleep, boost mood. And then part of what you're doing there is starting to see how you are an agency for positive experience in your life.
It changes the brain to process experiences differently.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just been shown. And because our kids' brains are like molding clay that are going to start to harden as they get to be our ages, and it's way harder to change and learn, right? They are especially wiring this stuff. And this has been, here's the silver lining. And, not to minimize the fact that people have had some really horrible losses and painful things happen. But the silver lining of this last year has been, I, in my lifetime, have never experienced such an opportunity to teach kids resilience skills, to highlight, and not just teach them, but this was the other, when I said I had sort of 2 thoughts, this was my second one, was that what our kids also need from us is a highlighting, of all of the, because again, they're feeling like they're falling short and they're of all of the expectations and not doing any of the things well, is really highlighting and reinforcing all that they are doing and learning and displaying and all the ways that they're growing. Like, I was really working at helping everybody reframe, like, instead of looking at 2020 as a dumpster fire that was just useless, right? Why don't we look at it like we're like that's hero, like, strutting away from the explosion behind us. Like, we just killed all the bad guys or knocked out all the bad guys, and like nothing can touch us now, like,
we're survivors,
how about that?
And we're fighters, and we're figuring out a way.
We're fierce. Yeah. So like highlighting for them, like, because they don't even realize how they have learned some things that are going to be like serve them for a lifetime, but we can help them recognize that, which means that they will we're helping grow and wire that stuff for them. If they can recognize how they have been flexible and adaptive, and maybe they've developed some self-care, some way of being self-directed learners, or more responsible, or more self-entertaining, or better problem solvers. I've seen a lot of kids become kinder. Like, they admit, they're like, you know what? I just realized, like, if I kept being a jerk to my little sister, like, my every day was really going to suck all day long. So I started to, just like, I could choose to be impatient. I could choose to snap at my mom. I could choose to, but it's like, I realized it was just sort of serving me. Like, it was working against me.
Yeah.
So, so highlighting, like here's what I see, the ways that I've seen you grow, the things that I've seen you learn from this, so that they can log that in. It's like, oh yeah, I'm kind of a badass after all. Like, I'm not defeated by this year. It hasn't diminished me.
It's been really hard, and I've survived it. And how can we
our
brains to focus on the positive of that? Because of course, biologically, we all want to, it's what's the Rick Hansen, the neuropsychologist, his phrasing that the positive is like Teflon to our brain, just slides off, and then negative like Velcro, and becomes easy. And so part of the resiliency skill set that you're talking about here is actually helping our kids to see where have we grown? How are we strong right now? How are we doing well? And gosh, in a really hard year, look what we've done. We survived.
Yeah.
And we're getting through it and building skills. And by doing that, just that mental focus on what's good, what's gone well, how we've grown, that's a life skill. The ability to look at failure or to look at hardship and see survival and growth and learning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, that pretty much wraps it up, other than I want to come back to the self-care piece. I want to wrap up with the self-care piece, because as the parents said, as the kids said, like, you're getting this on me, is that, because I've also, I talked to plenty of grownups, and I'm one of them, where I think, again, like, this year has given us, it is like surfaced, I think, our strengths right? It's like being those of us, all of us who are parents recognize that when we had kids, like especially in the beginning, like they bring out your greatest strengths, and your greatest weaknesses. Like it all just sort of bubbles to the top, right, at different moments. Yep. And I feel like this year has been like that a bit, right? It's sort of, for a lot of people, it has triggered, their own unresolved stuff, their traumas, their stuff around losses, their stuff around fear. Mm-hmm. And so just sort of recognizing that, like, I know I don't want to overuse the whole oxygen mask thing. I mean, we've heard the oxygen mask thing all year long, but it is really true that part of it is those mirror neurons, right? Like what we display, our kids end up wiring and soaking up, right? But that they also just sort of, they feel it in ways that they can't define or recognize, right? And part of some of their, they absorb that as anxiety. They absorb that as a heaviness just because they're so intimately interwoven with us. They absorb and settle their stuff in their own bodies, mm-hmm. right? Yeah. And so if we just being honest enough with ourselves that us having healthy routines, us having, morning routines and evening routines that help keep us on the rails, or getting our own therapy, it's a really, therapy has, I've never known so many people to getting therapy right now. There's a lot of people getting therapy, but just sort of owning and recognizing for yourself and really giving time to your own practices to take care of yourself mentally and emotionally and physically, so that you can support, because you can't support your kids' wellness if you're not on the rails, and if you're not grounded yourself.
It's such a really great way of articulating that. And to echo, I mean, both Dr. Beam and Dr. Hamilton referred to the fact that of American adults right now, about a third qualify for a depression or anxiety diagnosis. And it's probably more than that, but at least a third. Yeah. If you think about a third of teens and preteens and a third of the adults in the US right now with diagnosable depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that, and that doesn't mean that we hide our authentic selves from our kids. Yeah. I mean, this is again a beautiful moment to model that authenticity, to model that strength is getting help sometimes. Is using your resources. That's strength and wisdom, right? It's not a weakness. And so to be able to say, like, wow, like, you know what, I know this is hard for you. Like, I know this is hard for you. Like, this has been really hard for me. And I'm actually struggling with some depression. I mean, when early on, somewhere, it felt like it was early summer, whenever Michelle Obama did an interview, was it with Oprah? Like the kind of, that went out, and she said, and I'm like, this is Michelle Obama. Like, she just has all of her crap together, right? But, and she named it, and she said, I'm feeling some depression, like just a the level of depression all the time. And it's like, I just melted down. I was like, Michelle Obama just said it out loud. Like, she just named it.
And to fully feel it when somebody.
Like, yes.
And when and then kids, we're giving them the language and the permission to be honest about how they feel. And then we're showing them how to cope with it. And how we cope with our own stuff.
We don't pour it on them and leave them to hold that too, because that's hard for them too. When we put our grown-up stuff, we're just showing them, like, I empathize with you, I understand, and then showing them, and then this is what I do with it. This is how I handle this in a healthy way. So that maybe you can follow my lead or join me in these things that I'm doing, to take care of myself.
So to resume, or to kind of summarize that, what we can be doing to give space right now to our kids, asking them, what do you need? Validating their feelings and their experience right now. And then brainstorming as a family, how can we make this time, how can we make sure you get your space? And how can you feel safe and have a place to retreat to, even when we're locked down at home? Or what do you need to feel okay going to school when it's so awkward right now? What would help that to be more okay? And then just shifting into other things we can be doing, naming how they're growing, what their strengths are, how they've developed as people in this last year and survived, and focusing on survival and being, awesome and strong and getting through a ridiculously hard time. And then also self-care for ourselves. Because if we're not regulated, that like love and logic model,
the co-regulation.
Yeah, if we don't have our frontal cortex in place and we flipped our lid, our ability to respond to them when they're in stress mode, it's not pretty. And so if we regulate and then we name how we're managing it, we're helping them to wire their brains that it's okay to be depressed sometimes when it's hard. And these are the tools we can reach for. We can do therapy, we can get outside, we can say what we need, we can create safe space, all these different ideas. Okay. So in conclusion, is there anything else that you want to say, or does that feel like a good place to wrap up today's conversation, which has been longer than we expected, but great?
I think that summarized everything.
Okay. I can't thank you enough on behalf of IFMA. This has been fantastic. And I can't help but this is a really useful resource for everyone. I mean, for kids and for adults right now, to just be talking about this and exploring what we could be doing better. Yeah. So thank you.
Indeed. Thank you
so much
for your
time. Yeah. Go ahead and end the recording. All right.
Yeah.
So how does this connect to, so in terms of the work that you do with addiction, with helping prevent addiction and substance abuse, how does that play into the importance of helping our children to feel safe, to feel connected and supported and heard?
Yeah. So this is the scary part, but I need to say it, is that we are having a mental health epidemic in our kids. There's a mental health crisis in our kids. Is that depression and anxiety have gone up 30%, and it's probably more now because that was from a couple of years ago. In the last 10 years, that suicide rates have skyrocketed for young people. The worst rates are for 13 and under. That substance abuse, while use, the rate of use isn't increasing, what is increasing is addiction and overdoses and accidental overdoses. So I need to tell you that because I know that there's a lot of denial, and we have denial because it protects us from being terrified of letting our kids out the door, right? So it is an increasingly complicated, risky, addictive world that our kids are operating in, and that we are kind of at tug of war with a little, or feeling like we're at a tug of war with, right? Yeah. But the beautiful thing is that what all the research shows, and what I know in 20 years of clinical experience, is that the foundational piece is the most preventative thing, the thing that helps our kids be equipped to navigate through all of that stuff healthily and into a thriving young adulthood and beyond, is based in our relationship with them. And so them feeling known, understood, believed in, cared about, and respected by us, which they don't feel as much as we think they do, right? So that there might even be a question: do you feel this way? Do you feel this from me? And what could I do, differently? But a lot of that comes from what we talked about before, is them feeling validated. And when we listen to them, when we take some time and we approach, like you had said before, with curiosity, we approach them with care and curiosity of understanding their inner and their outer worlds, and just listen, ask them some questions not about who they are and about what their world entails. What are they exposed to? What kind of decisions are they having to make? Right. But all of that comes with us. Again, it's like the communication and the relational skills, so that we establish ourselves as one of the number one sources of support and information, and that they trust us with that, comes with, right, us having a relationship with them and having some strong communication skills, which again include foundationally us respecting them for who they are and who they're becoming, and letting them know that we really respect that, and validating their feelings and listening to them, instead of the things that we tend to do as parents, which is tell them what we think they should think, feel, do, believe, who they should be, right? So flipping that around. So
to bring all of this together, I mean, in the scope of this conversation, we've talked about what are kids feeling right now? How do we give them more space? And what as parents, can we do to really support kids right now? And what I'm hearing you say is, pandemic or no, in general, the way that we can support our kids into healthy adulthood is by having a vibrant, strong relationship with them and supporting them and feeling connected, heard, validated, respected, and valued. And that what's happening in the pandemic is that because we're under so much stress, and a lot of the structure that was there that offered some of that is different now, it's even more important that we be having these conversations, that we come in without judgment, and that we ask, and that we understand, and that, we don't get caught up thinking, I know what this is like for you. I can see it from the outside.
Right.
And since you were a baby, like, I know this is not that big of a deal. You'll be fine.
I know you better than you know you.
Don't get lost in that thought. And there's this thing for my health coaching training that useful as a mental strategy to think about this. Think of a color. And most people will think of red or blue. And that's just because we tend to all have a certain kind of connotation to the word color. But where it gets interesting is if you said blue and I said blue, was it even the same blue? No.
Right.
And to have that beginner's mind, the purpose of that is to really think, like, when my kid says she's fine, what does that really mean to her right now?
Yeah, I was gonna say, that about honoring, what I heard you say, kind of echoing me, was honoring their perspective, honoring their experience, and letting it be.
Yeah.
Not letting them, not telling them, well, you could do something, feel something different.
Yeah.
Like sometimes just listening and honoring and validating that is a huge, really weaves together a mutually respectful relationship with our kids that will, if your kids are not yet in the scarier years, where they're exposed to things, out there, it will matter, right? I mean, you want to build as young as you can, you want to start building that up so that by the time, they are having to make tough decisions and navigate through complicated, scary things, then they know they can come to you and say, I'm having this feeling, I'm seeing this thing, I'm confused about this, I'm scared about this, about those kinds of situations, and trust how you're going to respond, that you're going to listen, that you're going to validate, that you're not going to freak out. You're going to, ask them, hey, how can I help? Just like you did during the pandemic.
Yeah. That you're safe to come to.
Exactly.
And they're not going to be judged, ridiculed, or belittled. And that you're not going to, lose it and then become another stress point, that they can come to you for guidance and for support. And part of that is built when we ask these questions.
Right.
It's hard right now. I can see it's really hard for you right now.
And again, I think overall, it's like, again, what they are getting as individuals and what we can be really embracing as what we are learning and what we are growing and what we are fusing as a family right now, that I think we are going to find. And if we choose to use it that way and choose to embrace it that way, that we can use all of these skills and growth really into forever after in all of those tough situations that happen, whether it's a big epic tough again, or whether it's just what we were just talking about, is helping them navigate through what is going to be increasingly challenging through their adolescence.
Yeah, that's brilliant just in terms of the behavior science of like coping with challenging situations. My understanding is that in the teenage years, in the formative years, the brain, whatever it figures out around how to survive a hard situation, that's what it wants to default to. So what it figures out is
it hardwires. It
hardwires in. And so we have an opportunity to support our kids right now and hardwiring in positive, resilient coping strategies. And that's so important, not just as a way to support them, but also because this is a legacy they'll carry with them into adulthood, and because it helps to promote the chances that they're not going to be reaching, for addictive substances, or abusing substances. And that hadn't really connected for me until this conversation.
Or all of the other addictive things. Yeah. I mean, social media, self-harm, eating disorders, porn, like there are increasing amounts of opportunities, sort of addictive, self-destructive opportunities in an increasingly complicated world. And so our relationships have just never been so important, with our kids.